Hello, you may have heard of me. I'm the unsinkable Molly Brown, but people really call me just Maggie. I was born in the United States and I grew up in Colorado. My parents were Irish immigrants. When I was 19 years old, I married a mining engineer named J.J. Brown, and we moved to Leadville, Colorado. We had 2 children, Lawrence Palmer, born in 1887, and Catherine Ellen, we called her Helen, who was born in 1889. We became very wealthy when my husband invented a new way of extracting gold from the silver mines. We were millionaires. My husband got stocks in the silver mining company. Soon, we were able to move to Denver and purchase a fancy new home. This is our house in Denver. It's one of the most fashionable parts of town. My home in Denver is now a museum. Here's what the inside of my home looks like. Here's the grand staircase. So now with all this money, I wanted to travel and study languages. I studied literature at the Carnegie Institute and traveled to Europe frequently. On one trip, I was staying in France with my daughter Helen, and I got a message from my friends, the Astors, that my grandson was ill. Well, my grandson was sick, and I knew I had to get home as quick as I could. So I headed for the first ship I could find back to the United States. It was the Titanic, the ship that was unsinkable. I boarded her in Cherbourg. I was a first-class passenger. On the night of the disaster, I was reading a book in my room when all of a sudden, the ship hit an iceberg. I hurried out onto the deck, and I began helping other women get into the lifeboats. Finally, I was forced to get into lifeboat number 6. I took control of the boats. I rowed the boat to get to safety. All of the women had to take turns rowing to keep warm. They began to call me the unsinkable Molly Brown. I watched as the Titanic disappeared beneath the waves. When the Carpathia finally arrived in the morning, I was able to help many of the passengers because I spoke French, German, and Russian. I was chair of the Survivors Committee. People wrote all kinds of stories about me, calling me the unsinkable Molly Brown, but my name really was just Maggie. I saw all those poor people on that ship who were destitute. They didn't have any money. So I started raising funds for them. I raised over $10,000 for victims of the disaster. I was chair of the Survivor Committee, and we gave a special award to the captain of the Carpathia and a medal to every crew member. People said I was flamboyant. They said I had an interesting sense of humor. One letter I wrote after the Titanic sinking said, "After being brined, salted, and pickled in mid-ocean, I'm now high and dry. I've had flowers, letters, telegrams, people till I'm befuddled. They're petitioning Congress to give me a medal. If I must call a specialist to examine my head, it's due to the title of Heroine of the Titanic." After I got back to New York, there were many kind words and letters. This is one I sent to my attorney. It said, "Thanks for the kind thoughts. The water was fine and the swimming was very good. Neptune, that's the god of the sea, was exceedingly kind to me, and I'm glad to be high and dry." When I got back to Colorado, I became involved in politics and the women's suffrage movement. Colorado was one of the first states for women to have the right to vote. Now, I always did love going to France and studying the French language. I even helped organize a special group called the Alliance Française, which encouraged people to study French culture. I worked to get the right to vote, and I helped raise money for victims of the disasters. For all this, the French government gave me the Légion d'Honneur Award. This is the symbol for the Alliance Française, a French culture group I helped organize in the United States. Now, one of my other loves was the stage. I always did like acting, and later on in my life, I went back to the stage to even studied drama in Paris, performed in New York and Paris. They even wrote a Broadway show about me. They called it The Unsinkable Molly Brown. Here's a picture of me on the stage in New York. I had such a good time working with all those actresses. I was in New York City when I died in 1932. And this is where they buried me, next to my husband, J.J. Brown. And that's why I'm buried in Long Island in New York. Well, I hope you've enjoyed listening to my story. I've heard they've even made a movie about that famous ship, that Titanic, on that night. Hope you enjoyed hearing about the unsinkable Molly Brown.